This is
Morning.
Bud. Is there an echo?
Not much of one.
Okay, somebody might have a second device on, but okay. Um, Good morning. This is Bob Brown. Welcome to B Cube Sunday morning. I am here in my ghostly, dark, poorly lit studio where the sun doesn't shine because we're way up north. Ah, and I use natural lighting mostly. And I am joined today with this is the second Sunday, so that means it's Tom. Tom's got the show, and Tom has picked anime. And Tom, tell us about your guest.
My guest is Giles or Gilles. I use the French pronunciation because that's what I learned when I first met him. Um, Poitrias, who is an expert on all things related to manga and anime. And he has also written a book about wandering around Tokyo called Tokyo Stroll. And what I want to talk with him about specifically is Tokyo in anime and anime in Tokyo, because there are all sorts of wonderful anime that include Tokyo and things in Tokyo that one just stumbles across that are anime related. And I figure we can talk about things like the odd statue of Godzilla or Gojira, which is
hmm
not really anime, but close enough.
Yeah.
Or Joe, the fighter, or you're walking down the street and there's this statue, or the Studio Ghibli clock, or
hmm
any of a number of things.
Oh,
And
yeah. There's
certainly
quite a
there's an awful
few.
lot of
Yeah, there's
yeah,
quite a
there's
few.
certainly there's an
There's.
awful lot of anime that are set in Tokyo. We'll talk about
Mhm.
the difference between anime and manga. We'll mention the new Miyazaki film, The Boy and the Heron, um, which actually has scenes in Tokyo during the war.
Mhm.
So, but
And I will say, I love that cover. That is a great cover.
Mhm.
yes, well, his publisher did a very good job for him. Publishers
Yep.
often do, right, Bob?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Bob's a
well,
publisher.
yeah, we often do, but occasionally we receive feedback that says that cover sucks so bad that were you to put it next to a black hole, the black hole would be sitting in a cup of cover. Uh,
Mhm.
bad day. But anyway, Tom and Giles, I'm going to leave you to the wonderful discussion that only the two of you can have. And so I shall be available in private chat. And don't forget your audience. They're
Mhm.
out there. And that said, I'm pushing my own button.
There
Okay.
we go.
Mhm.
So, um, for a little background, I have been to Tokyo with Giles, and we have wandered around and had a wonderful time and seen all sorts of wonderful things. And we've also seen lots of really interesting anime, both together and singly. Excuse me.
Mhm.
But what do you think of? Why did you start going to Tokyo?
Uh, like many people, I saw a lot of Japanese movies in art house theaters and had a curiosity about visiting Japan. But I ended up narrowing it down to Tokyo for a few reasons. One, because I had been watching a lot of anime and manga and reading a lot of manga, and those are often set in Tokyo since it's such an important geographical location. Think like American comics often set up in New York City. So financial reasons made it difficult to travel around the country. So I saved up enough vacation time and enough cash and took off a couple friends and went to Tokyo. And my goal was to show things my friends were interested in and to avoid the big tourist spots, to look for things that were not in the big tourist spots. Watching anime and reading manga gave me a nice list of places that were just not listed in the tourist books. So I tracked down their locations, had a rather poor book atlas for Tokyo. This is like way before, smartphones and all that. So I was navigator. My friends took their cameras. I left my camera at home, and we had a great time. We just like explored. And then a couple of years later, I did it again. A couple of years later, I kept doing it. And tracking down things that were in anime and manga was one motivation. Another one was the fact that I could easily start identifying what a place was, because I was learning the city from both reading about it, looking at photograph collections, and wandering around. I would start recognizing things in manga and anime that I was reading. So that worked out pretty well. And eventually, all those travel notes, because I would spend like a goodly amount of time every morning before work in the coffee shop, taking notes of places to visit. Those notes became the basis for Tokyo Stroll.
Yes. Well, and when we went over with you, you were testing it out, actually, the first
Yes,
time.
the first trip was a test run, actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
the book had not come out yet. That was a year before it was scheduled to come out, and it was delayed for 3 years because of the COVID pandemic.
Mhm.
Finally came out last November of last year.
Yeah. And of course, there's a difference between Tokyo as it is now and Tokyo as it appears in various periods in
Yes,
anime and manga. One of the
very much so. Yeah. So if you're watching an Ozu movie, for example, because I'm going to go into anime, manga, and live action, bounce around between those. First, I better define some terms for people. I mean, even these days, most people are going to know the terms, but some people might be a little fuzzy on it. Anime is Japanese animation made by Japanese producers for Japanese market. Manga is Japanese comics produced for the Japanese market. Who's involved in it might be international. There are actually some very creative Americans and Europeans who are working in both industries in Japan, but what they're producing is primarily for the Japanese market. And then, of course, live action cinema, I don't think needs much intro. But if you're watching older movies like Ozu, Kurosawa, you're going to be watching a Tokyo that looks very different today.
There's a fourth category that you want to mention here, which is light novels.
Light novel, actually written literature in general. Now we're kind of in a golden age for Japanese mysteries. 25 years ago, if you took every Japanese mystery that had been published in English and put it on a shelf, you'd have about that much shelf space.
And most
science
times
fiction.
Edgar Rampo.
Yeah, there was like one Edgar Rampo story back then, volume
It was a collection. Actually.
Yeah. Now, it was a collection of stories. Now, you could fill a good chunk of a bookcase with Japanese mysteries. There's still plenty that hasn't come out yet, and but ebook publishing is helping because some titles are kind of iffy for the print market, but published as ebooks they could do well. Miyuki Miyabe's Puppet Master, for example, it's like 5 volumes. That would be a major, challenge for a publisher to market and sell, since Japanese mysteries are not that big a seller in the mystery market. And she's marvelous. But I got it as an ebook. But anyway, we're digressing. So back to Tokyo and in the stuff. Yeah, previous historical periods, you can see sometimes certain landmarks. For people who have seen the Godzilla -1 movie in the theaters, you see the Wacko department store, one of the few buildings that survived the firebombing of the Ginza district. Just like rubble all around, and then this one building which survived and is still there. That's a major landmark. And so that you will see in older movies, but a lot of the small street level stuff has been rebuilt. And one of the reasons for that is after World War II, most of Tokyo was maybe at the most knee-high in rubble, sometimes just ankle-high in rubble, because it's much of the city was wood. And I found a map of the burned out areas that was made by the U.S. occupation, and it's incredible how much of the old city was just totally leveled. So people rebuilt what they could really quick. That tended to be kind of shabby. When they had money, they tore it down, rebuilt again. And it was better. And then when they had money, they tore it down, they rebuilt again. So Tokyo, over time, looks different. So when you're watching a show, consider when it's set. Now, most shows you're going to get these days in anime manga, and to a degree in literature, are set in contemporary Tokyo. Movies, there's more coming out subtitled, set in contemporary Tokyo, but most of those are not available in the US. You have to get the subtitled European edition or the Japanese edition, which, but more is coming out. Movies are really picking up now for Japan. But anyway, the modern city, there are certain landmarks that show up. The Twin Tower Government Metropolitan Building is an example that shows up a lot. So when you're looking at a movie or a show and you see that building, you're in Tokyo. For a long time, Tokyo Tower, red and white huge broadcast tower with observation decks. That was a big landmark. Now we have Tokyo Skytree, which is literally a quarter-mile tall broadcast tower. Mm-hmm. The Kaminarimon Gate in Asakusa is another landmark. There's all these famous places in Tokyo that are landmarks. And so for the Japanese viewer, that tells them this is in Tokyo. It doesn't say Nebulous City.
Some of the bridges also.
Some of the bridges, and Tokyo has over 3,000 bridges. Most are small.
And they're all named.
Yes, and everyone has a name. Every bridge in Japan has a name. It's required by law. And at one end, there will be, in kanji, a sign of some sort with the name of the bridge. And in fact, there's some places where they took the river and put it into a culvert and just have a roadway over where it was. You will occasionally still find the bridge signs have been left, mm-hmm. Identifying the bridge that had been there. The other thing that's interesting is geographical qualities. If you see a river where both sides have concrete walls, pedestrian walkways, and buildings right next to it, odds are that's the Sumidagawa. If it is set in Tokyo, that is the Sumidagawa. It's the only river in Tokyo. It's big. It's really big. There's smaller rivers like that too, but that's the big one. And that's a major landmark that pops up in stories again and again and again. Another type of landmark, which gets subtle, is each shopping district will have street lights of a different design. Mm-hmm. And if you know the city well enough, and I don't, you can identify a lot of neighborhoods that way. I can only identify a few. Mm-hmm. Someday I'll put
There's also the whole thing of the subway stations each have their own tune.
Yes.
Yeah. If you hear a tune being played, you can tell exactly where you are.
Which subway station you're on. Subway and train lines are color-coded on the maps and on the trains. Mm-hmm. So the Yamanote line is the train line. It's color-coded green. Mm-hmm. There's subway lines also color-coded that way. If you're a train buff, you can identify the historical period by the model of train engine that they're using, the design. But you have to be a hardcore train buff for that. And of course, those guys exist. It gets lots of stuff like that. I'm going to focus right now mostly on the fairly recent things, mm-hmm. because that's more useful for people who travel, people who are reading about the city today, and it's also where a lot of things show up are more recent times. But let's take a look at the depiction of the city in anime and manga. For a long time, it was kind of just generic urbanscape. Buildings, roads, bridges, very little identifiable. In Urusei Yatsura, in the original TV series, you know that they are in Tokyo because you have these occasional distance shots of the spread of the city and then a tall group of skyscrapers popping out with way beyond everything else. Well, that's the Shinjuku west side of the station skyscraper district, which was the first major skyscraper district in Japan. And so that became like, oh, that's Tokyo. That's all you see that's identifiable as a location in that series, which was a very long series. Then in time, you might start seeing other landmarks. Tokyo Tower, built in the 1950s, pops up. The Metropolitan Government Building, built in the late 80s, pops up. And in fact, the first time I saw it was in the first OVA for Bubblegum Crisis. And in that show, you see the building being demolished because it's set in the future after a major earthquake and Tokyo is being rebuilt. And that building is being torn down, which is kind of amusing because that was released before the building was complete. So they had some fun with that one. Let's see, City Hunter. Rather good series about a gun for hire in Tokyo, highly illegal occupation, since one thing, private citizens cannot own handguns. You have to go through a rigorous process to get a rifle, even an air rifle. That is set in Shinjuku. There are certain identifying big landmarks that show up in that. One of them is the Shinjuku Station on the east side with the big My City department store, which incidentally was renamed several years ago, and then a few other landmarks in that area. Other than that, it could be any of the major train stations in Tokyo, because that's the only visual identifiers. You hop forward to the latest City Hunter, Shinjuku Private Eyes, it gets very detailed, because nowadays it's common for an anime set in Tokyo to have multiple identifiable locations. And so in this one, you've got the massive, park that's south of the station is a major part of the story. You've got Golden Guy, this little tiny area of like hundreds of dinky little bars that seat maybe 8 people at the most. You've got action going on there. You've got other things in Kabukicho, the red light district. So you get all this stuff in much greater detail. So there's a transition from the early days, early would be late 40s, on up through the 60s into the 70s. Only a few indicators, but after the 70s, you start getting more in the 80s and 90s. And today, you can actually say in some cases, the city itself is a character in the story.
Yeah, well, so 221B Kabuchiko stories, it's set in a cross-dressing bar in Kabuchiko with a Sherlock Holmes character, and it's Mrs. Hudson is fully bearded cross-dresser.
Yes.
It's very strange to see that.
It is strange. It's a strange show.
I thought it was quite good, actually, but
yeah, it's enjoyable. It's not one I would have bought, but I know a lot of people would really like it. One of the ones that really broke out, and I have to do this because I had a hand in the U.S. release, was Megazone 2-3, released by Animigo, and you can only really get it directly from their website. But Robert Woodhead and I talked, and we decided I would do liner notes for the cultural elements in the show. That includes not only Tokyo locations, but by beer brands, foods, various other things. It's set in the late 80s. A good chunk of it takes place in the Harajuku, Motesando area, and other parts, and has a lot of interesting things. So Bob said, okay, we'll do it. We'll put the liner notes on the back of the poster. The liner notes came out as a book. There is a huge amount of stuff in that show. I even identified, 1980s LA punk rock band T-shirts that I saw in it,
Mhm.
and it was a fun one to do. I watched the show. Luckily, he gave me a copy with the timing codes, so I watched it like 7 or 8 times and took
Mhm.
notes, and then watched it again, took more notes. There's things in there I couldn't identify.
Mhm.
But it was also delightful, and I saw a sign for Henry Africus,
Okay.
uh, and go seeing a San Francisco bar branch sign in Tokyo. I think they may actually still have Henry Africus in Japan. I mean, they're no longer in the U.S.
Yes.
Uh, that kind of detail comes in over time, and that was done in the '80s. Uh, and at the '80s, the production companies had tons of money. They put a lot of effort into their things, and it was a straight to video production. So they really, really ramped it up with that kind of level of detail in there. Uh, Another title that has really good information uh, is, oh boy, oh, it's not going to let me display it.
Yeah.
Those
If you
copyright
can type
safety
some of
things.
these titles into the chat, then people can go and look them up.
Yeah, yeah. Old boy, don't confuse it with the Korean movie. It only has uh, two things in common. The guy gets locked up for a long time, and he wants to find out who did it. That's it. There's nothing else in common between the two stories.
Mhm.
This one's a slow burn. Lots of good Tokyo locations are in it. And I'm going to back up in the hopes that I can get this to display, because frankly, I I have a suspicion. Let's see. Yeah, it does now. It does now. For some reason, it decided to not display it. It hopped to a blank page when I touched the screen. But oh boy, it's a great example because you get to see a lot of Tokyo. The main character ends up sleeping in a friend's bar in Golden Guy. There's lots of scenes along the Sumidagawa River,
Mhm.
and there really aren't any major landmarks. It's a lot of neighborhood scenes.
Mhm.
So it gives you a good feel for what the city is like on the neighborhood level.
Mhm.
So that's part of the fun for that.
March comes in like a lion, which is very much
Oh yes,
about Shoji, is very much a neighborhood
yes,
that we actually went to
right,
along Sumidagawa. And
yeah,
it's really beautiful to see how the neighborhood comes out and then actually have seen the neighborhood.
yes. And that neighborhood is still largely populated by families that settled over there around 1600. So it's still got a very neighborhood feel. I did not include it in Tokyo Stroll because I felt if 20 people randomly show up at the same time, this compact neighborhood would be impacted very heavily by a lot of people being there. I did put it in the web supplement for Tokyo Stroll, so people who discover it that way can explore. And part of the fun with that particular anime, and also the manga is now coming out in English.
Mhm.
Volume 2 is coming out soon. Uh, you get to see again a lot of the minor details of the neighborhood. There's even one scene on the walkway along the Sumidagawa River, because between the levee and the river itself, the city has built these pedestrian walkways that go forever, and they've been doing this for a couple decades. You see one scene in the anime where the tide is in, and part of the walkway has been built at a slant, so the tide actually comes in and covers part of the walkway intentionally.
Mhm.
That little level of detail I love about these shows. And so, yeah, lots of the little places. Uh, Asakusa is a neighborhood that you see referenced, usually by the famous Kaminarimon Gate,
Mhm.
but not too much else. And then you got Sarazanman, which is available streaming and also on disc, about three kids, teenagers, who get caught up in a curse, and they have to uh, aid a kappa, a mythical beast, and then the curse will be lifted. You get to see a lot of places. You see the, you know,
They get
shopping,
turned into
very
kappas themselves, and
they
get turned into kappas themselves and have
yeah,
to deal with raising the curse while they are supernatural beings.
yes,
And it's
and then you go
very
back to
strange.
human.
And
Yeah,
there are
the
things where you couldn't do in America.
no, it would be a bit of a thing to do in America, but you get to see things like Kapabashi, the kitchen street, which is lined with shops for kitchen stuff. You get to see around it, the temple area. You get to see a little bit of the other side of the river. You get to see the Samita Park on the Asakusa side. And then in the closing credits, you see all these actual photographs of the area put into like a music video format. Another area that has heavy local storytelling is Ikebukuro. There's the Ra Ra Ra, which is a series of novels, and then there's also a series of anime set in the neighborhood, and then there's Ikebukuro Westgate Park anime, which is set there, and it's set on both sides of the massive train station. Lots of locations I have been to, so it was a delight to watch. Years ago, and it's damn near impossible to find, there was a 4-volume manga, and originally the whole thing was a novel, or maybe a series of novels. It was also made into a TV series, which is not available. The novels have not been released in English. But this is an example of how Tokyo has come from being landmark indicators, a little bit of detail, more detail, and very specific to a neighborhood detail.
And actually has become, in some shows, a major character.
Yes.
Itself. You know,
in
we
itself,
talk about
for sure.
how Los Angeles is a character in Ross MacDonald's Lou Archer stories. Similarly, right. Tokyo becomes a character in a lot of these, as in, March Comes In Like a Lion, or 221B, or any of a number of.
In Your Name, significant character. And in Garden of Words, specifically the area around Shinjuku Station and south of Shinjuku Station. Same director as Your Name, marvelous film. And in fact, my friend Stephen and I went to the park, and there's a little gazebo where most of the story in the park takes place. And there was a couple taking pictures there. And as they were getting ready to leave, I said, "You've seen Garden of Words?" And the guy goes, "Yeah, he was from Taiwan." So we take our pictures. There's actually a group of couples lined up on the bridge wanting to go and take their pictures. It was quite something. And then in Your Name, there's that scene at the very end where the main male character is climbing the stairs, and the woman is going down the stairs, and a little red, high handrail, red metal handrail going up the middle, and they turn to each other and exchange a few words. Well, I took my friend Stephen, to Suwa Jinja because he loves shrines. And I said, we're going to approach it by this particular stairway. And there were people there, large numbers of people, taking pictures at the stairway. And it's something generically referred to as the red stairway. And it was quite something. I had to wait for a while before I could take shots of no pictures or only the back, no people or only the back of the people. Because I tend not to take shots with their faces visible in case I use them for publication. And it was also a delight. I chatted with a few folks, a lot of Taiwanese again. That's become a major place. And that brings up the whole other issue of tourism relating to locations in anime, manga, and movies. I mean, that's been a phenomenon for some time, not just with Japan. I mean, how many people have gone to Italy because they've seen it in a movie, or Paris because they've seen it in a movie. They wanted to see the specific neighborhoods where certain places were shot, or gone to New York City, or gone to San Francisco,
or Venice,
of course. So with Tokyo, with Japan, tourism in relation to anime, manga, and movies is not a real new thing. In some areas, it won't get very many foreign tourists, but they'll get a lot of Japanese going to it.
hmm
So that's become part of the whole industry there. And
Well,
in
you
fact,
told us that Asakusa is where Japanese tourists go to see Tokyo.
that is well, it's one of the major spots for Japanese tourists to go. It's been a pilgrimage location for over 1,000 years, and then starting in the late 16th century, 1580s, the Tokugawa Yasu the Tokugawa family became sponsors of the temple for a while, and then it grew and became a larger pilgrimage site. And then, of course, with modern transportation, more people are able to come. It's probably one of the more crowded, over touristed areas in Tokyo, but it's still not that bad.
No, it really isn't. I
Yeah.
tend to refer to it as being like Pike Place Market on steroids.
Yes. And the thing is about Japanese tourists, and this influences foreign tourists who are in the area, they keep moving. Or Japanese crowds, they keep moving. They don't stop.
Mhm.
Or if they're going to stop, they stand off to the side. So it works really, really well on getting that kind of flow for there. So people who are going there because they're anime fans, the Nakamise row of shops going up has been seen in a lot of manga and anime. That's one of the major things there. Somebody asked, how long has anime and manga been around? Anime, the oldest one known, was a experimental project dated to roughly 1906. They're not sure because it was never commercially released. 1920s is when they began releasing them, shorts done for movie theaters, just like animation in the rest of the world. Manga was primarily pages or short stories in magazines, along with other texts, primarily children's magazines, until after World War II, in which there was a shortage of entertainment, and you had book rental shops, and they would commission entire books to be drawn and published and rented in their shops. So that manga in a modern
That's
sense.
for manga in the modern sense. Manga, of
Yeah.
course, back to Hokusai in terms of
Right.
books called manga, which were collections of illustration rather
Yeah.
than stories.
Yes.
And I think
Yeah,
we're wanting to talk about storytelling in an illustrated form here, as opposed to just really cool and amazing illustration.
Random illustrations. Yeah. The older manga tended to be things like single panel cartoons, political cartoons in the newspapers, or 4-panel strips, things like that, short strips. It really exploded in the 40s with the rental manga scene, and then later in the 50s, when magazines devoted entirely to manga were starting getting published and transformed the industry. And then, of course, nowadays it just continues. It still accounts for about 30% of Japanese publishing today. So that's a hefty market, which means you can have highly specialized manga. Manga devoted to mahjong, manga devoted to very specific sports, very specific niches. You've got BL manga, which is male romance stories written by women for women and girls, and that's a phenomenal, huge industry that has spread internationally. They're now being published in Thailand, Indonesia, China, all over the place. It's fascinating.
Does BL manga predate slash fiction?
No, the first story started in the early 70s.
So
yeah,
slash fiction starts about the same time. So they're happening about the same time, because slash fiction grows out of Star Trek and
Star Trek fandom, right?
The Kirk / Spock thing was notably written about by Joanna Russ.
Yeah, you'll sometimes hear English speakers refer to BL manga as yaoi. Yaoi is actually in Japan uh, by those who are fans, used to refer to self-published works.
Hmm.
So if you go to a convention like Comic-Con, you will find usually a section devoted to yaoi manga. And like Slash, those will be parodies. The first time I went to Comic-Con, it was my friend Steven, who Tom knows, and we're walking in, and Comic-Con is huge. You have to mark out on where things are, and you go straight to what you're going. You're not going to browse through because each day there's 12,000 sellers. And then the next day there's 12,000 different sellers, and it runs for 3 days. So we're walking past a whole area, and there was a popular anime at the time called Tiger and Bunny, which is about a superhero team. And he's going, wait a minute, we're walking past all this. What's this? I said, this is all Tiger and Bunny yaoi. He goes, we're going. And I took him straight to a table because I knew they had a parody manga about Lupin. And loving Lupin, I wanted to look at it. It turned out to be a yaoi manga where Lupin jumps Jig and rips his clothes off and so forth. It's a very humorous story done by a woman. Stephen bought it. So the first thing he bought was a Lupin yaoi manga. I also bought one for a friend of mine as a gift who loves the Lupin shows. But yeah, it's about the same time as Slash grew up. Similar phenomenon, female driven. The original stories in Japan were done by women. It's still even today done primarily by women. And in the early 70s, you had this influx of female manga creators, because before then it was heavily male dominated. And the women artists and story writers came in, and they started doing the stories they wanted when they were kids. So Heart of Thomas is considered the first one. It's a story with homoerotic overtones set in a German boarding school in the late 19th century. And you know right away when the story begins, Thomas is not in the story. He's committed suicide at the beginning of the story. And the story revolves.
To begin with.
Yeah, so everybody's dealing with that issue at the school. But, and it's grown. One time I was with a gay friend. He's an American. And he's going, we're in a used bookstore. And he goes, do you think they have any of that BL stuff here? And I said, yeah, they go to the next floor. So we take the escalator down to the next floor. And there is an entire friggin' huge wall, maybe about 35 feet long, of nothing but BL novels with illustrations. My friend pops one open, flips through at random, finds an explicit photo and goes, oh my God, are there more pictures? I told him, we have to leave. He goes, why? I said, because 3 different women have come, seen us, and turned around. We're disturbing the customers. And so, getting back to Tokyo, there are BL authors who have done works set in Tokyo. There's one work called Antique Bakery. It's not extremely explicitly sexual. It doesn't even have a relationship. One of the characters is gay. And in one part, he's just gotten a job. And he's trying to explain to his boss, I've gotten fired from so many jobs because so many people hit on me. They end up with having fights at work. You know, fellow employees, customers, and so forth who are jealous of each other. And the boss says, not going to be a problem. I'm making this bakery to have female clientele. So your baking skills is what matters. But the guy, to make sure the boss knows what's going on, takes him to Shinjuku Nichome, the famous gay bar district. And while they're sitting in a bar, he gets picked up. And so he tells his boss, I'll be back in a little bit. So you just wait here. So the boss and the bartender talk for a while. After a while, the guy comes back, you know. And then as they're leaving, a very shy young man comes up, says, oh, I've heard about you and so forth. Can I spend some time? And he tells his boss, I'll see you tomorrow at work. And he and the young guy head off to a hotel. That's the only gay stuff in the entire thing. But Antique Bakery is a marvelous story, and you get to see that little bit of Tokyo in the story. And so anime and manga as a way of getting glimpses, little imperfect glimpses of Tokyo is a handy thing. If you dig deeper, you can find more. These days, there are websites that are devoted to locations in a particular show. So, for example, you can look at your name, and there are websites that will tell you where all the locations are, or what locations were the basis for creating a fictional location in the story. And that makes navigating a lot easier.
Yeah.
I used to have to do things like dig through, architectural books, trying to identify specific buildings and stuff and neighborhoods that way. I still use those. It's still useful, but nowadays it's quite fun. You can see so much of the city.
I want to point out to people a long article that Giles is mentioned on the website Strange Horizons by Ada Palmer, that has just come out. A Mitfreud of anime and manga's relationship with Anglophone science fiction. Or this essay will not try to get you into anime and manga by Ada Palmer, which is a wonderful introduction to anime, manga, light novels, all that sort of thing, and how they work together. It's much less about Tokyo. Yes, somebody just noticed the Bubblegum Classic
Yes.
poster behind you. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a limited edition. The guy did 50 of them and sold them. He said he would never reprint it and he would never do more, but he just wanted to do it. He did 4 different designs and I only bought one. I should have bought all 4. It's an example of American doujinshi, American self-published work. Yeah, Ada Palmer's work is great. She's a wonderful writer.
She's a good novelist too.
Yes. Also, let's say, okay, we got the Christmas season coming up. People are probably, lining up their movies to watch. Here's one I recommend: Tokyo Godfathers.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, opens on Christmas Eve, finishes on New Year's Day, and it's going to get a special one-day release in American theaters for its 20th anniversary. Great film. The beginning of it is
content.
Yeah. Wonderful, fun film with numerous Tokyo locations and a cross-dressing bar. And then live. Oh yeah, I mentioned Kabukicho earlier. If you're familiar with the Yakuza video games, there's a movie based on them called Yakuza Like a Dragon. And when I first read a review of this, I said, oh God, I want this movie so bad. So 5 years later, it finally came out in the US and I grabbed it. It's set in Kamuro-cho, which is actually Kabuki-cho. They changed the name. Doing that kind of name change thing is not unusual in Japan. It goes back to Kabuki theater when they had all sorts of legal restrictions on who you could mention. And it's a delightful, fun film. And you really get a nice feel for the street level Kabuki-cho at nighttime. In fact, a lot of it was filmed in Kabuki-cho at night. It's a Takeshi Miike film, so you can expect some wild, crazy action and things in it. And people who have played the game tell me that they find it hysterically funny.
Yes, one of the commentators says that Miike Takashi is not for the faint of heart.
Yes. Yeah, I don't care for some of the grotesque and violent stuff he did, but it got him on the market. A friend of mine went to the world premiere of Audition, which is, I believe, at the Venice Film Festival, and he said he had never seen people run out of a showing before. He'd seen people walk out of a showing, but never seen people run out of a showing before. But his more recent films I really enjoy. Another one that's set in contemporary Tokyo, multiple locations, including some which are commonly not on the tourist map, like parts of Otaku, is Shin Godzilla. Hideaki Anno's revisioning of the original story, doing it for modern times. And that's a fun film also. It's very much a procedural on the way a bureaucracy has to do things properly, but also the way fact that a bureaucracy can set up an ad hoc group to deal with a problem that doesn't have to necessarily be tied into all of the procedures. So that's a fun one to go through. If you're looking for pre-war Tokyo, people might want to read the fiction of Edogawa Rampo, who we mentioned earlier, or there's an out-of-print Jidai Mono historical series called Bion the Assassin. The DVD discs are really inexpensive on the secondhand market.
I got that and was really, really pleased with it.
Oh yeah, it's a great series.
Brilliant
And
series.
stars Ken Watanabe as an acupuncturist whose side job is killing people, people who deserve it. He's assured by his manager, and that one actually has a few scenes shot in Tokyo. There's one scene where he and one of his associates are walking along, and there's a tall wooden fence on one side and a low stone fence with a pond on the other side. That's at Nizu Jinja.
Mhm.
Since most of Tokyo's historic buildings were destroyed in the 23 earthquake and in the fire bombings of World War II, a lot of the shots set in older parts of the city are actually filmed in studios in Kyoto or in towns that have preserved some of their old buildings and stuff. But that's a great series for that kind of information. To discover that. We mentioned light novels. They're a good source for things. Durarara, which I mentioned, is set in Ikebukuro. And that's a multi-volume set.
For this group of people, Read or Die.
Read or Die, yeah.
That,
Read or Die would be good.
About a woman who has superpowers around paper folding.
Yes.
And books. It's all about books.
It's all about books, yes.
And there are two sets of it. One is a 3-episode
OVA, yeah.
OVA, and then the other is how many episodes?
I think it's 26-episode TV
26.
series.
Yeah.
Begins in Hong Kong, but quickly transfers to Tokyo, and includes scenes in the Japanese National Library.
Mhm.
One manga which is available, like if you want to get an in-depth look at a neighborhood in Tokyo, from a Japanese perspective, not from a tourist perspective, not from a sightseeing perspective, but somebody being shown around a neighborhood. You know, there's this theater here, there's this park here, there's this wonderful bakery. There's a short series, it's 8 volumes, and it involves 2 somewhat chunky metalheads who inherited a real estate company from their parents. And in Japan, when you rent an apartment, you go to a real estate company because all of that is handled by realtors. They will show you the apartment and everything else, and they'll help you fill out the paperwork and get you settled in. It's called, and it's only available as ebook, Is Kichijoji the Only Place to Live? And because that's a yellow cover, it's kind of like glaring a lot. But Is Kichijoji the Only Place to Live? Is a series of stories. Each one is a different client comes in. Kichijoji is a beautiful neighborhood, really popular to live in Japan. And people come to this real estate office looking for an apartment in Kichijoji. First thing that they know, they filled out their form about what they want for an apartment. The 2 realtors, their cousin handles the information side. He hands them a set of printouts of places that match up. They grab the person, they take them outside, they bundle them into the car. First thing the person knows, they're not in a whole other part of Tokyo. Because the landlords know, the real estate agents know that there's plenty in Tokyo that's wonderful. And they show these people all these wonderful apartments. And God, I think we need underfloor heating and more apartments in America.
And then there's Japanese toilets. We've actually installed a toilet seat like Japanese in our main bathroom.
Yeah, those are wonderful. Oh, those are great. But it's a great series because it's a Japanese eye view of what's in the neighborhood ordinarily. We took a trolley car out to a neighborhood. I missed the stop. We had to go back. And then we walked to a temple going through a street lined with beautiful 300-year-old trees. You were on that walk, right?
Mhm.
Well, that neighborhood is in one of the stories. So is Kichijoji the only place to live? It's only an ebook. It's pretty specialized. So they know there's no regular print manga market for something that specialized. Maybe someday they'll decide. But that's a great way to like get an idea of what specific neighborhoods look like. Because it's the ordinary stuff. It's like, oh, here's a bakery, here's a bookstore, and every shop in it really exists.
One of the things that we did while we were there is we walked down Snake Street the first time.
Yes.
And Karen and I were struck by how in an average neighborhood in Tokyo, you'll have a shop, one shop in the middle of the block or on the corner, in the middle of residential. The separation between shopping and residential is much less regimented.
Yeah.
Much less strict.
If you want to open a business out of your home, that's fine. You can do it. Mm-hmm. If there's something about it that annoys the neighbors, then you deal with it. I remember one thing about an article I saw. A woman had lost her job. She was really into nice clothes, not expensive clothes, but nice clothes. And she decided to open a clothing store for women. She lived in a huge apartment complex. So she and the neighbors sat down and talked. They thought it was a great idea. And she got racks on rollers so she could put them aside at night. And during the day, she could pull them in and open up her apartment as a store. There are some cafes. They don't do a huge business, but if you want a nice gourmet meal, they're open 2 nights a week, Friday and Saturday, for one meal. You make your reservation, they talk to you about the food, you show up, and they have a dinner for you and your friend or your partner, whatever. There's a few places like that, and those are in apartments. The mix.
The last time we were in Asakusa, there was that little bar, Kawabunga, that we ran into. It was not open most of the times we wandered by, but at one point they were. And, it was 4 seats total.
4 seats. Yeah. Golden Guy is entirely like that. A big bar in Golden Guy is maybe 8 seats, because they're really small. And Café Jet is the one I want to go to sometimes, named after the French science fiction movie. Because that one, Bar Jet, actually, it's 100% non-smoking, because what they have you do is they have you write a little message on a Post-it and stick it on a wall. So they had to ban smoking from the place. But all of this mixture of retail, commercial, you might have a temple, a shrine in the neighborhood, all together. That dates back to old customs, and the other thing that's nice is you will have shops that have been in business literally for 400 years. Mm-hmm. There's an association in Tokyo of businesses that have been in operation for over 100 years by the same family. And just some nice stuff there. I took a friend to one shop, my friend Rick, after you guys had returned back in 2018. We went to Ningyo-cho, and I took him to one store, and like you walk in, you go, God, this place was probably built in the 60s, old counters, old glass display cases and everything. You could see into the back, into the kitchen. They got the Norin there, but the Norin's open. Old couple and the young man are fixing things. Their entire product line for the place is based on tofu, all these cooked tofu things and stuff, tofu donuts and so forth. And there's a woman in her 20s operating the register, and she's stuffing things in the bags and sealing them up. And strapped on her back is the baby, sound asleep, totally zonked out. We order some amazake. They've got cheap folding chairs out by the sidewalk. We sit out there, have our amazake. And then I tell Rick, I say, let's go across the street. What looked like an old shop in the ground level was actually a 6-story apartment building. Mm-hmm. And so what they probably did They closed the shop for a while, tore everything down, rebuilt it with the apartments, put all the furniture and everything back into the shop so it looked the same. And they make revenue off the apartments as well as off the shop, which is why so many of these old businesses survived the pandemic in Tokyo, because their customer base may have dropped, but they had other income sources. Some places like Torinoana, which was a marvelous set of stores, they had like 7 stores in Japan and 1 in Taipei. They had 3 stores in Akihabara. They're down to 1 store in Tokyo, in Ikebukuro, and the Taipei store, because their clientele would come in from outside by train, do their shopping, and go home, sometimes from 100 miles away. And the pandemic ended that. Anyway, we're getting away from Tokyo and anime and manga. I can, as Tom will testify, you can never shut me up about Tokyo. It just kind of keeps
that's
going.
part of why I wanted you on.
Yes. We'll do a quick thing. We're running low on time.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, Tokyo and literature, because there's a few titles I want to recommend. And I just mentioned the Ningyo-cho neighborhood, which is a wonderful neighborhood. And let's see. There's a series of novels. The first one is Newcomer, and it is set entirely in the Ningyo-cho neighborhood, including some natural businesses. And it was made into a TV series that played on the international channel ages ago. And it's about a detective who is new to the neighborhood, and he's working on helping on a murder investigation. So you get to see him go to various shops in the area. And it's a great book. I love this writer. I love his stuff. And if I can get back to the main screen. Yeah, it keeps wanting to put me into images. Let's see. Yeah. But anyway, that's one of the books that's set in an actual contemporary neighborhood. There are 2 other novels in the series. One's called The Murder in Tokyo, and that one's out. Same detective, same area, more towards the Nihonbashi area. And then another book, The Scarlet Gang of Asakusa.
Yes, that's just what I was about to mention. The Yasunari Kawabata.
Yes, yeah, Nobel Prize
The bottom that is
winner.
cut off by the URL, the QR code for your book, which we should actually.
Yeah.
Can you kill the QR code for a moment, Bob?
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. We're doing good.
Yeah.
But it's set before the 23
earthquake. Really wonderful.
Yeah, so it's a very old part of the city. So we're talking about historical locations. And but there's various pieces of literary works which are set in Tokyo. My advice is only go for the ones written by Japanese writers, because the ones I've read written by non-Japanese writers, I usually just put the book aside after a first chapter or 2, because they get so much about the city wrong and the culture wrong. It's really, I read a mystery. It was a wonderful mystery, but the guy had lived in Tokyo for 8 years, but hadn't interacted with the city or the culture. He made all of these incredible gaffes about the city. He must have spent all of his time hanging out in bars with other foreigners, which some people do. If they're assigned by their employer to go to Tokyo, they don't necessarily want to hang out with the Japanese. Give me a break. There's Tokyo anime manga. When you're watching a show, if something looks interesting, take a note, research it, maybe plan a trip. Not that expensive a city to visit. Definitely worth checking out.
Karen and I did an Airbnb, and actually living there and doing some of our own cooking made us feel much better about the city than only going to restaurants and only, we got to know the neighbors, the people who run the used clothing shop right next door, the bar and restaurant across the street, which says, if you don't speak Japanese, don't come in. But they got to be very friendly with us. and I'm sure that they would have let us come in because we were willing to try. And you don't need to know English to go to Tokyo, or you don't need to know Japanese, rather. In terms of getting around, everything, all the signs in the subways include stuff in English. Everything is fairly easy. Yeah, we make mistakes, we make cultural gaffes, but people are willing to put up with a lot if you're willing to just try to meet them part way.
Yeah. And Tokyo is an extremely polite city. I've been to other cities. Kyoto tends to be a little snooty at times, but that's part of their heritage. Osaka, oh man, Osaka people I love. They are so friendly, they're so outgoing, they're so informal, but damn it, they smoke too much and I have a tobacco allergy. So Osaka is a place I very rarely go to. But I love Tokyo, and every trip I go to Tokyo, and I try to go every couple of years, sometimes every year. I try not to repeat the same place unless I'm showing it to somebody. So I always go to different places I've never been to, and there's so much of that city I have not explored yet. The book is mostly about the 23-ku area that was part of the old city of Tokyo, mostly set in the flatlands, which were the commoner districts. Quite frankly, the areas which were mostly samurai places were not that good, but not that interesting because there wasn't that many old businesses and shops. Still interesting stuff. But you can go into some of these neighborhoods and you can literally spend 3 days exploring this stuff in that one area. I once pointed out to somebody, I could do a 2-week tour of Tokyo starting at Asakusa and each day going in a different direction. In walking distance, and a walking tour.
And your book very much shows that. We could talk for hours.
Oh yeah,
we have talked for hours.
Yes,
not today, but it's amazing if we open up just a little bit to being available to the wide world. As Andrew said in the chat, there's a lot less smoking in Tokyo than there was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Tokyo outlaws smoking on major public streets and in most areas. And there's, with the new national laws on smoking in restaurants above a certain size have to be either completely non-smoking or have a physically segregated smoking area. So Kamiya Bar, when we go to on the second floor, there's a smoking area, but it's sealed behind a door. And I've only once smelled any smoke coming out of that when somebody held the door open for a while. So.
Well, Tom's hinting that I need to cut this down because you guys are so cool. I could sit here and I'll be blunt. I could listen to you talk for a long time. This has been a remarkable visit. And Giles, I got to imagine that you're never at a party without a crowd of people gathered around listening to you talk.
If they can handle me blabbering about Tokyo incessantly, yes.
Well, Jill is also one of the major experts on anime out there and has written a book called The Anime Companion, which he's working on a revised version of, which is a really good introduction to the history and breadth of what's in anime.
It's a glossary, basically. It's a dictionary. And I am slowly working on a second edition. It'll probably be an ebook. It'll probably be way too massive to easily do a print. However, there will be a print on demand copy according to my publisher. We haven't talked about it in years because when we were last discussing the book, I mentioned, oh, by the way, I want to do a Tokyo book sometime. And Peter said, no, you do that first. So go to my website, koyagi.com.
It's KOYAGI.
.com. And in there, I have a supplement to the Tokyo Stroll book. And every location in the book, I have bookmarks that you can download and you can use in a variety of, smartphone and tablet navigation apps to get yourself to the location. And I'm also building a supplement to the book, which has more in-depth information about some things, and also has a lot of locations that are not in the book. And, that's a labor-intensive process, and I don't think I can go into a description on that. But
Giles,
I think it takes another hour.
I can only say thank you
okay.
and appreciate the fact that you use what is some obvious mental and organizational skills for good, not evil. I mean,
I am a retired librarian.
oh, okay. Well, thank you. And you have, I mean, I've just been sitting here listening to the as you skim the surface of the depths of your knowledge. It is appreciated. Tom,
Yes.
anything you want to add?
Other than if you get a chance to go to Tokyo, do. And remember, there are all sorts of guides out there that will help you to get around, but you can do without them and just become part of the city. Take your time, go out. Don't just stay with the English speaking people.
Yeah.
Oh,
Wander
yeah.
about, discover stuff.
Yeah.
That's good advice for anywhere. The last time I had a chance to go to London, I found myself just getting a little apartment on the sixth floor of some building that was a long walk from anywhere.
And you didn't hang out with any of the English speaking people.
Yeah. Well, I was lucky. The signs were all in English.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But I just found the city vibrant. I found everything. I mean, without ever leaving the neighborhood, I could feel like I had really, truly been to London. And just so I'm hearing a description that says that works in Tokyo too.
Yes.
And so thank you very much. Now, since this is BQ Press, let me tell you what BQ Press is up to. We have got 4 anthologies that we have read for that we are currently editing. Anybody who's saying, well, what's going on? Well, Bob is currently editing. Bob, that's me, the cute one, is currently giving some feedback on editing on a novel series that BQ Press is putting out called Breaking Up is Hard to Do. It's ardently political about what happens if the things continue the direction they're going in terms of violence and the willingness of people to use violence to overturn the election, to cancel the Constitution, to start trying to pretend that the government we have doesn't exist, but the government they want can be brought into existence. I'm enjoying the edits and everything, but I can tell you it's scary to work on this and then turn over and watch the news and then go back to work and say, hurry, Bob, they're catching up. So that's why I will say to everybody, pay attention to who you got running your city council. Pay attention to who you elect to school board. Pay attention to who you've got doing things in your city. For example, our city, we often talk about, wow, it seems like it's really difficult to get the affordable housing problem solved until you look and realize you have all realtors or real estate industry people on every seat in the city council.
Mhm.
Well, what do you expect? Is realtors are not known for their affordable housing positions. So that's why I say to you, pay attention, get involved, be part of your community, um, and help preserve democracy. And thank you, Giles. And thank you, Tom. And next week we have Cliff Winnig. And we are working on a couple of special things because between now and the end of the year, because remember, we're going to be here on Christmas Eve
And New Year's Eve.
and New Year's Eve. And so we are hoping to do some special things for you guys as you guys do special things for us every time you crack a book. So thank you much and love you all and goodbye.